Pushback against hardening the border, a city's concerns.
Anybody could really get in there. It's not very well protected.
The reasons for ordering razor wire in some communities.
This is for anything that's attempting to cross the border illegally.
Plus, hearing the personal calls for tougher immigration laws.
Come to the cemetery with me and tell me that this is a manufactured crisis.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. Before President Trump declared a national emergency at the border, the federal government took steps to fortify barriers along the Arizona-Mexico border. That included installing concertina wire along the top of fencing in Nogales last fall. Within the last month, the military added additional rows that reached the ground in some sections. City leaders condemned the move and threatened to sue the federal government to get it removed. This week, we heard some of those concerns firsthand from Deputy City Manager John Kissinger.
I'm concerned about it. I'm very worried that some small child or unexpected person could walk into that wire and get tangled up and get cut up. You know, and I've seen the effects of concertina wire on a person, and it's not pretty. It's pretty nasty.
This is federal government property, though, and it's pretty well marked. Isn't that enough to keep people out of it?
It's absolutely marked. You'll see there's signs on here saying not to enter. But it's not very well protected. There's about a 4-foot gap on there. And I'm worried about a child, you know, a toddler that gets out of a mom's car and goes running across the street or something, or goes chase something, getting in there. They don't read. They don't understand what it says, no trespassing. You know, anybody could really get in there. It's not very well protected.
Are there rules in place or ordinances in place in Nogales that don't allow for this type of wiring in other areas?
Absolutely. In the city of Nogales, you cannot use concertina or razor wire anywhere lower than 6 feet. It's not allowed in residential zones. It's only allowed in commercial and industrial zones, and only for a fence that protects some type of storage. There's been tunnels that were found that go right to, like, underneath that, where that van is.
Before becoming deputy city manager, Kissinger spent nearly 30 years as a Nogales police officer. We asked him to reflect on his time in law enforcement. The challenges that you face as a police officer, was it related to the border?
Well, it was, because one of the challenges we have is, as soon as a criminal was able to cross the border, they were typically sometimes scot-free. You know, and it was a challenge having to work with Mexican law enforcement to work to keep those, you know, to get those people arrested and accountable, either there or on this side of the border.
So when this style of fencing went up, changed things for you a bit as an officer?
Well, a little bit. You didn't see the undocumented immigration as much, but the crime of smuggling people kept the same. It just pushed it out to the outside. You know, out in the rural areas.
If you were an officer today, would you see the value of a fortified fence like this one?
Well, I could see the value of it, but I would also be, you know, I'd be hopeful that somebody would keep me in check and make sure that I didn't harm anybody in doing my job.
So we're going to confront the national security crisis on our southern border.
We also got Kissinger's thoughts on the president's national emergency declaration at the border and what issues are more pressing.
No, this doesn't represent a national emergency to me, but I'll tell you what does. It's just right up the street here. There's a great big sewer pipe that brings over about 15 million gallons of raw sewage every day from Mexico into the United States. That goes unchecked for floating of drugs in it, chemicals that go in it. Not to mention the wash that's right next to it that brings uncontrolled floodwaters into the United States. To me, that's more of a national emergency. That would affect our citizens here in Nogales, and citizens up the Santa Cruz River all the way up to Tucson would be more affected by what's going on there than, I believe, the concertina wire on the wall.
Are there any positives to this? I mean, when you have military in town, increased law enforcement, that does provide an economic benefit, doesn't it?
Well, it does. It does a little bit, and we're very grateful for it. But you have to remember that 60% of our sales tax revenue, which we live and die on here in the city of Nogales, comes from people who cross that border to do shopping here.
Back in November, when the first strands of concertina wiring went up, city officials worried it would discourage shoppers from Mexico. A study from the University of Arizona Eller College of Management found that in 2007, spending by Mexicans accounted for nearly half of the sales tax generated in Santa Cruz County. While in Nogales, we wanted to get the community's thoughts on added security measures at the border.
Para mí, no deben de tratar los mexicanos así.
For me, they shouldn't treat the Mexicans like this. We're like any other human being, American, Mexican, Spaniard, and they should try to treat them better.
It is very dangerous, because a lot of people that have come from Mexico, they jump. It doesn't matter to them, and they fall, and it is very dangerous.
Some people visiting the border for the first time share their initial impressions, like 10-year-old twins Liam and Willa Perry Spears.
Big. Really big. Yeah. I had no idea that there was razor wire on it.
The two traveled from Minnesota with their mother.
So we came here to see the wall because the kids, it's hard sometimes to understand how the wall is dividing people and dividing communities.
At our school, we have definitely not heard any positive things about this.
It was also Axel Kreusch's first time at the border, visiting friends who recently moved to Rio Rico from the Pacific Northwest.
I think it's fine. I think we need one. I really do.
Well, for me, it reminds me of the wall in East Berlin. You know,
He's German.
I'm German originally, and to see that, it reminds me certainly of how the Eastern Bloc countries used to try and keep people out.
Nogales is one of at least 3 border communities in Arizona with concertina wire. Sabri Dickman, patrol agent in charge of the Nogales station, explained more about that decision-making process.
We initially targeted our concertina wire deployments in areas in the immediate vicinity of the ports of entry. And those areas have traditionally been very active areas. And so when we deployed the concertina wire, we immediately saw a little reduction in activity, and then we saw people cutting the concertina wire. And so from the time it was in place to currently in Nogales, we've had 100 attempts to cut or breach the concertina wire in Nogales. So we understand that if they're cutting it, they want to come across, and it is impeding them to some level.
So then perhaps the theory is if they cut the top 2, then at least the other ones remain in place.
And so that was why we put the enhanced level of concertina wire out there, because the 2 was not providing us the consistent impedance. They were cutting it, crossing, and so the extra layers of concertina wire provided a deterrent. And so since we've had the extra layers of concertina wire on the fence in Nogales, we've only had 1 attempted breach of those areas.
So there are some areas that look like they're more fortified with wiring than others in the Nogales area. Is there a reason for it? Perhaps that it's more in an urban community as opposed to rural?
Absolutely. And so when we looked at how we were going to deploy the concertina wire, we look at our strategy overall. First thing is domain awareness. Do we know what's going on in our area? The second thing we look at is an impedance and denial, followed by access and mobility, and finally by having mission readiness. Are our agents ready to go where we're going into? And specifically with the impedance and denial portion of this in concertina wire, we looked at places where we need to have impedance. We need to have time for our agents to be able to react to attempted illegal entries.
Is this really directed toward asylum seekers or just in general the traditional crossers that you've seen in that region?
This is for anything that's attempting to cross the border illegally.
Who ultimately makes that call? Is this a sector decision or a station? Because we have been to other areas of the border where we don't see the same level of wiring.
So we made the decision at the station that we needed concertina wire to fortify the downtown areas of Nogales, again to deter illegal activity in downtown. And so we made that request through our chain of command in the Tucson sector that went to headquarters Border Patrol in Washington, D.C.
Have you had conversations with community leaders about its placement and the optics of it?
Absolutely. We began meeting with the community in mid-November, specifically meeting with the chief of police, the sheriff's department, the emergency responders for the city of Nogales, as well as the Santa Cruz County, all of our federal and law enforcement partners as well. Had several meetings with them in Nogales. Recently we had a meeting with the mayor of Nogales. As a matter of fact, last night we had our quarterly CAB meeting, which is a Citizens Advisory Board in Nogales, which has been a partnership with community members going back about 30 years in Nogales.
What is the community, or what is your community advisory board telling you about the aesthetics of this?
So they do question the aesthetics of it, but they understand the value that it brings. And we've had same concerns as we've gone through evolutions in fencing. There was opposition to the bollard fencing initially, but that has changed the dynamics in Nogales significantly, and everywhere else that we've put that bollard type fencing. And we understand that, but ultimately we have to weigh what's most important, and our ability to secure the United States border is the forefront of what we need to do. And so when we deployed this concertina wire, specifically in Nogales, we looked at areas where the public didn't have immediate access, and also where the public could have access, we put up some safety pedestrian fencing so they couldn't become entangled in the concertina wire.
If there's any amount of pushback that you'll get from the city that would lead you guys to perhaps evaluate the concertina wiring placement differently?
So we partner closely with the city, with the county. We've always had a wonderful relationship with them, and we do take their feedback and concerns into consideration. We also have to take in consideration our mission and the current environment.
Let's say the number of asylum seekers begins to decline. Possible the wiring could come down, or given Nogales' history, it will likely always remain?
Yeah, there's no plans immediately to take down the concertina wire, but we're always evaluating the environment, and as things change, we adapt to that.
Okay, Sabri, thank you.
Thank you.
What follows President Trump's emergency declaration at the border is still unclear. Currently, more than a dozen states plan to challenge it in court. Earlier this month, a group trying to fundraise for a wall on private land made its pitch in southern Arizona.
I'm a citizen. I'm nothing more than a citizen of the United States. I feel deeply invested to this country.
The We Build the Wall organization held a town hall hosted by the Quail Creek Republicans in Sahuarita. After a GoFundMe campaign failed to raise $1 billion for its cause in time, the group became a nonprofit to continue collecting donations. Immediately after the town hall, we spoke to founder Brian Kolfage about why he's taken on the initiative.
I was fed up, and I really didn't think it would be me. I didn't think it would evolve into this that fast, but I was just fed up with the way things were going within the government and the politicians were handling it. And I thought maybe I could have a chance to influence something and have an impact, and I guess it was just really good timing, and it took off.
It may seem like a lofty goal, $1 billion, but a few months in, you were at what that made you think, you know what, this is doable, this is manageable?
Yeah, and I think, we raised $18 million before Christmas in 1 week. And that shows you the level of fundraising that we can achieve. Yeah, it slowed down a little bit. Now we have private donations. We're set up as a corporation, a nonprofit, and yeah, I think once we start, showing people that we're serious and we're gonna break ground and actually start building, it's gonna ramp right back up again.
So what does this wall look like? Where does it go? Who builds it? Give us some idea on what you hope comes out of all this.
The wall will pretty much look like what President Trump is building now. We might have a little modifications to make it better, to make it more efficient and cost efficient. We are gonna be the people with the money. We will hire out contractors to go on the private property and build it, and we'll handle all the logistics of it for the property owner. And it's going to be very simple, as like if that property owner just wanted to build a fence.
For the people who are not familiar with your story, what makes you qualified to kind of lead this charge?
I don't think it takes anyone really qualified to lead the charge. What makes us as a unit able to do this is our team. We're a team of people. We have the leading experts in all these different career fields on our team. I'm the face of this thing, and I think people were gravitated towards me as the face of it because maybe because I lost 3 limbs, and I'm out there doing this, and maybe they feel it's important because of what I've given. Well, that's just my aspect. And then we have people like Chris Kobach. He's the expert in border security and immigration. We have people like Eric Prince, Steve Bannon. Those are the political people, and they're also experts in their field. We have construction guys. John Moran had his hands on some of the biggest construction projects in the United States. And so I think as a team and as a unit, we are the most capable, probably one of the most capable in the United States right now to take on this project and build a wall.
How are you measuring success?
Well, I think when we break ground and start moving dirt, that's going to be the first, check mark. We're getting it done. And once we get that first mile up, another check mark, we're protecting that community. We start doing more miles and more miles and more miles and start fundraising and continuing this and getting the community involved and getting them, and this is their wall, this is the people's wall. and doing all these things and all these milestones, that's what our success is going to be measured off of. We're going to be saving lives, protecting communities, bringing up property values along the border, and that's the success of this. It's saving lives. Let's get this wall built.
Among the voices featured at the same town hall were those of two Arizonans known as angel parents because they have children killed by undocumented immigrants. Marianne Mendoza's son was killed in 2014. Brandon Mendoza, a Mesa police officer, was coming home from his shift when a wrong-way driver crashed into his car, killing them both. The driver was drunk and in the country illegally, and he also had a criminal history. Since then, Marianne has become outspoken about stricter immigration laws she believes could have prevented her son's death. Marianne, would you begin by telling me what the last 4.5, 5 years have been like for you?
It's nothing that I ever expected my life to be like at this time. I mean, the loss of a child is a terrible tragedy to endure in itself. But then to find out that it was at the hands of an illegal alien, who had committed crimes before and was shown leniency in our country, that just kind of spurred me into fighting for my son's memory and really to try and make a difference in this country so it doesn't happen to another family.
Since your son's death in May of 2014, I've seen interviews, I've read interviews with you, and one of the things that bothers you is the way politicians label this as a manufactured crisis.
Oh, absolutely, because, and I've invited some of the politicians who've made that statement, come to the cemetery with me and tell me that this is a manufactured crisis. I know it may only be one person to them, but I personally know probably 60 angel families that this has happened to. I've heard their tragic stories, and like I said this evening, this is a crisis created by our politicians because of their unwillingness to acknowledge us for decades. And so I blame all of them who have failed to step up and admit to the American public that we do have a crisis at our southern border. And it's not just for Americans. It is the illegal aliens who are crossing our border, and the family units, and the women and the children and some of the men. It's a humanitarian crisis, and we have to be worried about everybody. So you can't pick and choose who you're fighting for. It's either for all of humanity and what they're going through, or it's none. Shut your mouth. You just can't be for one and not the other.
After your son's death, you learned some things about the man who killed him, and we should note that individual also died. What bothered you the most about how this all transpired?
Because he had committed crimes up in Colorado in Adams County, and he didn't show up for his court date. He was released, to show up for court, which he didn't do. And then he just was kind of, here and going back to Mexico to see his family. And on one of his trips back home from seeing his family in 2002, he was caught at the border, taken back up to Adams County to face his charges. And the judge basically gave him a slap on the wrist and said, you shouldn't have done that and have a nice life. It was probably a week to a week and a half after Brandon was killed that I wasn't made aware that it was an illegal alien who had killed him. I honestly think Mesa Police Department was shielding me from that, just knowing, I had to grieve my son's death to begin with. But once that happened, I wrote a couple letters to President Obama at the time with no response. And I just knew that it was an uphill battle. We had politicians who didn't care.
Brandon would turn 37 this month. How do you want the American public to remember him?
He was a very kind, compassionate, 32-year-old man when he was killed, and he lived. He had put so much into his 32 years. It's almost like sometimes I think that subconsciously he knew something was going to happen to him. I can honestly say probably every week since my son's death, somebody has reached out to me to tell me an act of kindness that my son had done for them. They've seen me on TV, and they said, I just want to tell you what your son had done for me. So it just warms my heart to know that this is the kind of man that he was. And he's inspired me to become a better person.
The Grant Ronnebeck Institute is a think tank, basically.
Marianne's pain is shared by Steve Ronnebeck. In 2015, his son Grant Ronnebeck was working his shift at a convenience store when a customer got angry and shot and killed him. Grant was 21 years old. According to the Arizona Republic, the suspect was facing deportation at the time, but was out on bond. Our conversation with Steve began with how he remembers his son.
Grant was, even from the minute he was born, the smile that was on his face and the pictures that you see, that smile, he was able to brighten up a room, even from the day he was born, with that smile. I mean, it was like a magnet.
An undocumented immigrant who shot your son, killed him, who had a criminal past. There are people who will say you can't paint the same stroke over everybody from a certain population of people. Does that jive with you?
No. I'm not trying to paint one population or one group of people. Illegal alien is not a race. Illegal alien is a status. Are all illegal aliens bad? No, absolutely not. Some of them were great people. In fact, I know some that are just great people. They're good people. They're God-fearing, they're family-loving people. But then there's those that are coming here to take advantage of us, to take advantage of our social service systems, and basically take advantage of our country. And those are the ones I have a problem with.
You're on a crusade to be sure that Grant's death was not in vain. What do you hope comes of all this? How do you hope his life changes the world?
Number one, the awareness. The awareness that we have a problem. And part of that awareness is the drugs, is the sex trafficking, is the human trafficking. The other part of it is the sustainable population of our country and the freedoms that we hold dear. We keep letting millions of people in, free and clear. Crime goes up, the unemployment goes up, because they're going to take jobs and work cheaper. All of that, it's a trickle-down effect. It's trickle-down economics. The second thing is that I don't necessarily want Grant remembered for what happened to him. But since it did happen, I'd like his name and him to be remembered as the face of something historic and something good. And let's be honest, this is pretty historic when you have 300 and some thousand American citizens that are opening up their wallets to do what our government hasn't been able to do. It's historic, it's epic. And, you know, when Grant was a teenager, he always said, you know, I'm going to be famous someday. I never wanted it to be this way.
One of the president's arguments for stepped-up border security is that immigrants who cross illegally go on to commit dangerous crimes in the U.S. You just heard from parents where that was the case. However, many reports show that immigrants commit violent crimes at lower rates than U.S. citizens. One widely cited report from the Cato Institute looked at data from the Texas Department of Public Safety. Based on population sizes for all groups, it found that immigrants in the state legally and illegally were convicted at less than half the rate of U.S. citizens. The author of that report, Alex Nowrasteh, joins us from Washington, D.C. via Skype to explain his findings. Alex, it appears that much of your research is based off of data and statistics provided by the Texas Department of Public Safety. Is that really the state that's sort of serving as the model for this type of information right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Texas is the only state in the United States that tracks the immigration status of people once they're arrested, convicted, and then incarcerated in that state. No other state tracks it or keeps that kind of information for very long. So Texas really is the model for this. And it's a pretty good one. It's a border state. It's a state with the second largest population of illegal immigrants of any state in the United States. It shares a border with Mexico, and it's got a long history and tradition of harshly enforcing criminal laws. So there's really no way, and it has no sanctuary cities, never has. So there's really no way around it. It's a very good state to study this phenomenon.
We've heard President Trump say that people who are here illegally commit crimes at higher rates than citizens, for example. Any of your research support that?
I've seen no research that supports that, either that I've conducted myself or that has been conducted in the peer-reviewed academic literature. When we take a look and try to estimate the incarceration rates of illegal immigrants nationwide, we find that their incarceration rates are about half that of native-born Americans. And in places like Texas, where we actually have information on the number of illegal immigrants convicted, we find that they are convicted of crimes at a much lower rate than native-born Americans. We also find that in states with a lot of illegal immigrants, police there solve crimes at about the same rate as they do in states without any illegal immigrants. So it's not like people are coming here illegally, committing crimes, and going back to their home states at a very high rate.
What types of crimes are we talking about? Because, for example, a parent whose child may have been killed by an undocumented immigrant, though the number may be low when it comes to that particular group of people, that is a significant crime, homicide or rape.
Absolutely, these crimes are the most significant, and nothing that I'm telling you today could ever relieve, I think, the pain that a parent or a loved one would feel by their child or son, daughter, or spouse being murdered by somebody. This isn't meant to diminish that in any way. We're merely talking about the trends, talking about the rates, and this is what should inform public policy.
I contacted the Government Accountability Office, who also seems to acknowledge that it is tricky to sort of pinpoint some of the statistics that we're looking for. How is it that you've been able to really manage this data? Is it strictly using public safety information from the state of Texas?
It was a lot of luck, frankly. I took a look. I sent FOIA requests to every single state, Department of Public Safety and Department of Corrections across the country, all 50 states. Every one of them, except for Texas, responded and said, we don't keep that information, but Texas did. I was lucky in the sense that I was the first one to think of that and to do it.
What was your level of interest in it, Alex?
Well, I think the arguments around crime, around national security, around public safety are some of the most important arguments when it comes to dealing with illegal and undocumented immigration. That threat or potential threat is the most important. The government exists to protect our individual rights and liberties. If those rights are being violated by criminals, whether they be foreign criminals or domestic criminals, we need to know that so the government can try to mitigate that threat, can try to diminish that. It's an important, essential part of government. So I wanted to know what the facts are, and I found it just perplexing that for years, doing research on this topic for years, nobody had a clear answer to this. And there nationwide, it still isn't a very clear answer. We have data for one state. We have nationwide estimates of incarceration rates, but that's really it. We don't have any other information. So I think every other state needs to get on this game, needs to copy what Texas is doing, and make sure to record the immigration statuses of people who are convicted of crime by crime.
All right, Alex Nowrasteh joining us from the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
That's all for now. Thanks for joining us. To share your feedback, visit us on social media and let us know what you think. We'll see you next week.